Just to begin with, I just wanted to clarify when we talk about spring bulbs, that it's sort of a, a big generic word for everything from corms to tubers to rhizomes to hardy true bulbs. And also on this presentation, I'm not really going to talk about the, the vast array of items that you could select for spring bulbs. There are just so many, but just to look for in your spring bulbs, make sure they're large and firm, and that they, you look at the bottom of it to make sure it's also firm and it's not mushy. So you really want to make sure that you've got very healthy bulbs to put in the garden. Next slide. Why do we plant spring bulbs? Well, they are the earliest plants to bloom. And that's especially nice to see after a really terrible winter. I grew up in Saskatchewan. We had very long, hard winters, lots of snow, very cold. And it was so lovely on the prairies to see those prairie crocuses come through that snow. I always thought they were crocuses, but learned later on that they're really anemones. But nevertheless, to see that pale mauve with its little fur coat on its stems and leaves was a great sight. So they're very versatile. They're very low maintenance, and they work well in many different landscapes, whether it's a woodland garden or a rock garden or a perennial bed, or you can also put them in pots. So they really work in lots of different gardening landscapes. And some of them also provide nectar and pollen for our early pollinators. So the next slide, Anne. So when to plant? Obviously some places they would have planted them much earlier than we would here, but basically it's between September and November timeframe. You want to put them in 6 weeks before the killing frost or the first hard freeze. And the soil temperature should be below 60 degrees. And the key word there is consistently below 60 degrees. And, one of the articles indicated that you could get an inexpensive soil thermometer if you really wanted to make sure of that. The bulbs do require about 12 to 16 weeks of dormancy. And they do recommend that, you plant them soon after you purchase them, if you can, if the timing is right. Though if we get, a balmy week of weather, it might not be so good. You may have to put off planting them. But in the meantime, if you have to store them, make sure it's in a cool, dry place, like someplace in your basement. I think some people put them in their crispers, in their refrigerators, someplace that's going to keep them cool and dry before you're able to plant them. Next slide. Again, I wasn't going to talk about all the different kinds of bulbs that we have at our fingertips, but just examples of those early ones that come out in February, March, like snowdrops and crocuses. March and April, your daffodils, your hyacinths. May, early June, your tulips, your alliums. Those are just a few samples of what you could plant. Next slide. How to plant. We're talking about something that, not that you just throw it in the ground and forget about it, but they are low maintenance, and usually you're putting them in a place that they're going to stay. So you really want to make sure about that location, since this is going to be where they're going to reside. I don't know about you, but my daffodils have been in the same places forever. But and then in terms of your sunshine requirements, minimum 5 to 6 hours, but preferably 8 to 10 hours. It's really essential that these little self-contained little live growing items have good drainage, so that they don't rot or anything that's going to not work well for them. So drainage is really essential. You can always get a soil test, make sure like the pH should be between 6 and 7. Soil preparation, again, you want to make sure that you have dug deep enough. You want to have room that is below the bulb, a number of inches for the roots. And you also want to make sure that you have the proper depth depending on the bulb that you're planting, which this chart here, I know there's quite a few others, but essentially, it's, they say the depth should be probably, 2 to 3 times the length of the bulb. So that's why your larger bulbs usually are going to be considerable more inches down in the soil than your smaller bulbs. And sometimes the rodents like these little nuggets. So the articles I read said that, you should either even put chicken wire over it and then put, your mulch on top. The leaves will still come through that, or maybe some sharp gravel around the bulb. In terms of planting, unless you're having you have a very formal garden, you want to put these in clusters or drifts. They look much better than just a row, spaced 6 inches apart. And you want to make sure that you plant the bulb with the pointed end up. If you're just not sure, your bulb just doesn't speak to you as to what's the top and the bottom, they recommend you plant it on the side and it will correct itself. Okay, I think that is it. Next slide is just some of the materials that I looked at in putting this presentation together. It was really fun, actually. I learned more than I knew about bulbs to begin with, but I just wanted to say in closing that I just think they are really marvelous, little self-contained, that require very little human intervention and give us years and years of pleasure and joy at the beginning of our growing season.
Thank you, Gardener Sandra. That was terrific. We have a couple of people in our audience today that are really interested in bulbs and planting bulbs. And so I'm going to go immediately to the next question that we have. And that is, what will happen if my bulbs are not quite planted as deep as recommended? So who is going to answer this question?
Coolest things I ever learned about bulbs and roots is what I'm speaking to here. If you couldn't tell what was the top or the bottom of your corm. Oh, and just quickly, what the heck is a corm and what the heck is a bulb? Oh, let's see if I can get this right. There are different things you plant underground that will grow into plants. Some of them are root cells, which have become storage containers, and you plant those. So it's a root thing. It's part of the root which is enlarged and grows a plant. Others are part of the stem, which grows enlarged as a storage vehicle. And you plant this engorged stem storehouse, and it grows into your plant. Sorry, off the top of my head, I can't tell you properly which is which, but isn't that cool? So something else about bulbs. They grow 2 different types of little furry things that come out and help them. Adventitious roots are finer, and they bring the water and nutrients from the soil up to the green part of the plant. I have a hard time not calling them advantageous roots because that sure sounds like what they're good for. They take advantage of the goods that are in the soil. The other roots, which I had seen forever and didn't appreciate, are those fleshy ones, which really come out of the bottom of your corms and bulbs. They grow with elongated cells. They put down their roots and the cells stretch out as they grow. And then if it's not quite at a deep enough level, perhaps it's feeling too much warmth from the sun, it needs more cold in the winter. I'm sure there's a variety of things which make a plant decide where it wants to be in the soil. But if you didn't manage to get it 3 or 4 times the height of the bulb when it was freezing on the day that you bought them at the garden center and ran out to plant them, the bulb is going to do its best to get where it wants to be. It'll send out these, I'm sorry, I didn't call them by their name. It'll send out the contractile roots. Sounds perfect. They go down, and then the individual cells in the roots shorten themselves. So it reaches down and pulls down, and reaches down and pulls down. So you can see from the drawing at the bottom of this slide, over time, this plant has pulled itself down an inch, another inch, another inch. Isn't that remarkable? So a plant, and if you couldn't decide and you planted the thing on its side, those contractile roots are going to come out, whichever was properly the bottom end. They're going to pull down and they're going to start writing the bulb. In the meantime, I'm sure the upper part will come up and turn to the sun anyway. So bulbs are pretty cool.